ready to dive into something we all experience but maybe don't think too much about.
Let me guess. Is it about the food we eat? Or maybe the air we breathe?
You're getting warmer. It's about weather and climate.
Ah, makes sense. It's always there. But yeah, we don't often go beyond checking the forecast.
Exactly. But today, we're going beyond just, do I need a jacket?
So a deeper dive then.
A deep dive indeed. And we've got some really cool sources that explore how weather shapes our lives, our language, even different cultures.
And I bet we'll sprinkle in how all this can boost your English fluency too.
Absolutely. So why don't we start with this? Why is talking about the weather more than just small talk? I mean, it seems so basic.
Well, think about it. Weather really dictates so much of what we do every single day. Like, it influences what we wear, our plans, even how we feel.
Oh, totally. A rainy day can totally make me feel lazy.
Exactly. And being able to talk about it, with a bit more depth, it helps us connect with others. Like, it's a shared human experience we all have.
It's like a universal language in a way.
Totally. It can help you connect with anyone, anywhere.
Going through the sources, one thing that really stood out to me was how many words we have to describe weather. It's not just like hot or cold.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We can get much more specific. Like, instead of just saying hot, you could say scorching or sweltering.
Oh, or instead of dry, maybe like arid. I actually never thought of using that to describe weather before.
Right. It paints a more vivid picture.
And speaking of vivid pictures, some of these sources had great real-world examples, like that one about planning a picnic.
Oh, yeah, classic picnic problem. What if it rains?
Right. If the forecast says scattered showers, you might need a backup plan.
For sure. But if it's sunny all day, then you know it's perfect barbecue weather.
Okay, but let's be honest. Sometimes the weather is just something to complain about.
Oh, we've all been there.
So how do you complain about, like, the cold, but in a way that sounds natural and fluent?
Well, instead of just, I'm cold, you could say, it's freezing. I need to get a heavier coat.
Huh. I like that. So you're using the weather to practice more vocabulary.
Exactly. And it's not just individual words either. Our sources talk about idioms, those colorful expressions that are often, you guessed it, weather-related.
Oh, like, save for a rainy day. Though I always found that one a little confusing, hoping for bad weather.
It's interesting, right? Because idioms often reflect how a culture sees the world. So, save for a rainy day, even if it sounds kind of negative, actually emphasizes being prepared, just like you'd prepare for rain.
So it's not just the words themselves, but like the cultural values behind them, too.
Exactly. Which reminds me, speaking of cultural differences, you know how in Britain, talking about the weather is almost like a national sport?
Oh, yeah. It's like their go-to conversation starter.
Right, a way to break the ice without being too direct. But it's interesting how those weather conversations can be different depending on where you are in the world.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well, like in some tropical places, people might talk more about how heavy the rain is or how humid it is. But in places with, four distinct seasons, they might focus on how unpredictable the weather is or how fast the seasons change.
That's so cool how geography shapes what we talk about.
It really does. It's all connected. Language, culture, and the environment.
So what are some other interesting cultural things you found about, like, how people talk about the weather?
Well, one thing that really fascinated me was this study about weather proverbs in different cultures.
Oh, like red sky at night, sailor's delight.
Exactly. But in cultures that really depend on agriculture, these proverbs aren't just, sayings. They're like, accumulated wisdom.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So it's like they've observed the weather for so long that these proverbs actually hold true and help them, like, plan for planting and harvesting.
Exactly. It's like language and culture intertwined with nature.
That's really cool.
It is. But okay, enough about everyday chatter. Let's talk weather reports. Those can be confusing, right?
Oh, tell me about it. All that high pressure system and wind shear stuff. It's like they're speaking another language.
Right. But with a little bit of practice, you can totally decode them. For example, a forecast might say something like, scattered showers with a high of 22 degrees Celsius.
Okay, yeah. And usually I just kind of like tune out after that.
Uh-huh. I get it. But instead of just saying what that means, let's break it down a bit. So scattered showers actually means the rains caused by, like, convective activity. That's when warm air rises and cools, forming clouds and rain.
Wait, seriously, I always just pictured someone like literally scattering showers around.
But understanding the science behind it can actually help you plan better.
Oh, okay. So scattered showers means it's not going to be raining nonstop, more like on and off, and caused by, like you said, warm air rising.
Exactly. And a high of 22 degrees Celsius, that's just the warmest temperature expected during the day, which is pretty nice, actually.
Oh, right, Celsius. Sometimes they forget the rest of the world doesn't use Fahrenheit.
It happens. But yeah, so if I were planning my day based on that forecast, I'd probably, pack an umbrella, but leave the heavy coat at home.
Exactly. You're all set.
Speaking of personal preferences, have you noticed how everyone seems to have a favorite season?
Oh, for sure. Some people love spring with all the flowers and warm weather. Others are all about those cozy winter nights. I've always been an autumn person myself. I love the crisp air and all the colorful leaves.
It's amazing how something as universal as weather can be experienced so differently, depending on your background and everything.
It really is. So this is for you, our listener.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the weather where you are right now. Can you describe it using some of the words we've talked about? Is it sunny, overcast, humid? What else?
Maybe there's a gentle breeze, or who knows, a howling wind. Pay attention to the details and try to paint a picture with your words.
And remember, language learning is all about actually using it. So as you're describing the weather, also think about how it makes you feel. Does it make you happy, peaceful, maybe a little bit melancholy?
And here's a challenge. Imagine you're explaining your local weather to someone who's never experienced it before. How would you capture what's unique about it?
That's a great exercise. Okay, but shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk about something that's been on my mind this whole time. Climate change.
Ah, yeah. It's a big one. And definitely connected to how we talk about weather, especially now that we're seeing, more extreme weather and changes in climate patterns.
Exactly. And I'm curious, how do you think climate change is affecting the way we actually talk about weather?
It's tough to say for sure, but one thing that's definitely happening is we're using new words and phrases. Like you hear extreme weather events all the time now, right? Heat waves, droughts, crazy storms, all that.
Yeah, it's like our vocabulary is catching up to what's happening in the world.
Totally. And it's not just new words either. Like the way we think about certain words is changing too.
Like what?
Well, think about heat wave. It used to be like, oh, a nice summer day, right? But now it's kind of scary, like something to worry about.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's like the word itself has gotten more serious.
And even the way we talk about the future is different. We're more cautious now because, well, climate change makes things uncertain.
So instead of saying, it's going to be a hot summer, we say, it might be really hot if things keep going the way they are.
Exactly. It shows that we're actually thinking about climate change and what it could mean. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's not just describing the weather anymore. It's like discussing what could happen.
Right. And as we learn more about how climate change is affecting things, I bet we'll see even more new words and phrases pop up, maybe even new idioms. Who knows?
Like save for a climate change day, or every heat wave has a silver lining.
Uh-huh. Those are pretty good. Maybe they'll catch on. But seriously, though, the way language changes is really interesting. It shows how we're adapting to, a world that's changing, too.
It really does make you think about how powerful words can be. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into weather and climate, what are the, big things you want our listeners to take away from all this?
Well, first of all, remember that talking about the weather is way more than just making small talk. It's a way to connect with people, learn about different cultures, and even understand our planet better.
And don't forget all those cool, descriptive words and idioms we talked about. They can make your conversations so much more interesting.
For sure. And as you're chatting about the weather, think about those cultural differences and how the language around climate change is always evolving. We're all part of this, global conversation, and what we say really does matter.
So keep practicing, stay curious, and be open to learning new things about, well, the planet we all share.
And hey, maybe you'll be the one to come up with the next great weather idiom.
Challenge accepted. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. And to all our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll catch you on our next adventure into the world of knowledge.
It's funny how much we talk about the weather.
Yeah.
It's like the universal conversation starter.
Yeah, definitely.
But today, well, on this deep dive at least, we're going to go a little deeper than nice day, huh? We're going to be talking about weather and climate in English.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically to help you level up your fluency.
Great.
I mean, honestly, who hasn't fumbled trying to explain a crazy weather event in another language?
It's tricky.
I once tried to describe a hailstorm to someone, and
Oh,
let's just say it involved a lot of miming,
I can imagine.
a lot of hand gestures.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for this deep dive, we've got a stack of sources on weather and climate,
Okay.
articles, research, even some historical accounts.
Interesting.
And we're going to extract the most interesting insights for you.
Sounds fascinating. I'm
Oh,
ready
my grit!
to uncover some linguistic gems about weather.
Me too. So let's imagine you're traveling and someone asks you about the climate back home. How could you describe it in a way that's both accurate and engaging?
Well, I think it's helpful to start with some key vocabulary.
Okay.
Words like temperate or arid paint a broad picture of the overall climate.
Okay.
For example, if you come from a place with mild temperatures and distinct seasons,
Okay.
you could say, my hometown has a temperate climate with warm summers and cool winters.
Okay, that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
But how do we go beyond those general terms and really capture the essence of a place?
Well, that's where things get interesting.
Okay.
You could start layering in details about specific weather patterns. Let's take the word monsoon, for example.
Okay.
If you come from a region with a monsoon season, you could say something like, we have a distinct monsoon season in the summer with torrential downpours that transform the landscape.
Torrential downpours.
Yeah.
That's much more vivid than just saying heavy rain, right? It gives the listener a real sense of the intensity.
Exactly. And it shows that you're going beyond basic vocabulary.
Yeah.
And using language that's both descriptive and accurate.
Okay. I'm loving this.
Good.
But sometimes even familiar words can be tricky. I know I've mixed up fog and mist before.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a real difference, or are they interchangeable?
It's a common confusion.
Okay.
They both involve water droplets suspended in the air. But the key difference lies in visibility.
Okay.
Fog is much denser and can reduce visibility significantly, sometimes to less than a kilometer.
Wow.
It's that thick blanket that can make driving or even walking hazardous.
Right.
Mist, on the other hand, is lighter
Okay.
and doesn't obscure vision as much.
Uh-huh.
Think of a misty morning where you can still see the landscape clearly.
So if I'm trying to impress someone with my weather vocabulary,
Yes.
I should definitely use fog when talking about those spooky atmospheric conditions.
Exactly. It's all about choosing the right word to paint the most accurate picture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Good.
Great.
Love it. Now that we've talked about some specific terms.
It makes me wonder about how different cultures experience and describe weather. I mean, sure, we all have seasons, but it seems like they hold different meanings and traditions around the world.
Absolutely. Seasons aren't just about temperature shifts.
Right.
They're deeply woven into cultural identities and even influence language.
Like, I remember reading about the Japanese concept of kushu,
Yes.
which is all about the beauty of autumn leaves.
Yes.
It's not just that the leaves changed color.
Oh.
It's a whole cultural phenomenon.
Right.
With festivals, poetry, and art dedicated to it.
Kushi represents a time for reflection, for appreciating the ephemeral beauty of nature.
Wow.
It's even reflected in traditional Japanese gardens, designed to showcase the vibrant hues of autumn.
That's really neat.
You see, just understanding the word autumn wouldn't give you that depth of understanding.
Right. It's amazing how a single word can encapsulate so much cultural significance.
It is.
And I bet there are tons of other examples like this from around the world.
Oh, definitely. For instance, in some indigenous cultures,
Yeah.
seasons are less defined by temperature and more by the availability of certain foods or the migration patterns of animals.
Okay.
Their vocabulary might not even have direct translations for spring or summer,
Interesting.
but instead focus on what those seasons represent for their way of life.
So if our listener is trying to improve their English fluency,
Yeah.
do you think understanding these cultural nuances is important?
It's absolutely essential.
Okay.
Imagine you're having a conversation with someone from a culture where the rainy season is a time of celebration and renewal.
Okay.
If you just talk about the rain as something inconvenient,
Yeah.
you're missing out on a chance for a deeper connection.
That's a really great point.
Yeah.
It's about more than just being grammatically correct. It's about being culturally sensitive and showing that you're interested in understanding different perspectives.
Precisely. And that's what can take your conversations about weather beyond the superficial and into something truly meaningful.
So we've covered some vocabulary, talked about cultural nuances,
Right.
but what about when we want to go beyond small talk
Yes.
and have a more in-depth conversation about weather?
Okay.
What are some ways to steer the conversation in that direction?
One way is to talk about the impact of weather on daily life or current events.
Okay.
For example, instead of just saying, it's hot today, you can say something like, this heat wave is really impacting the local farmers. They're having to adjust their irrigation schedules to protect their crops.
Right. That makes the conversation much more relevant and engaging.
It does.
It shows that you're not just commenting on the weather,
Mhm.
but thinking about its broader implications.
Right. And you could even connect it to larger issues like climate change.
Okay.
For instance, you could say, I've noticed more extreme weather events lately. Do you think it's related to climate change?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It moves the conversation beyond personal observations
Yeah.
and into the realm of global issues.
And it allows you to demonstrate your understanding of complex topics in English,
Right.
which is a great way to boost your confidence and fluency.
Speaking of complex topics, can we talk about weather forecasts for a minute?
Sure.
I'll admit, I sometimes get lost in all the technical terms and symbols.
I understand. Weather forecasts are packed with information.
Yeah.
And it can be overwhelming if you're not familiar with the jargon.
Uh-huh.
But breaking it down can make it much more accessible.
So let's say I'm looking at a forecast that says, partly cloudy with a high of 25 degrees Celsius and a low of 15 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
What's the best way to make sense of that information?
Well, first, focus on the big picture.
Okay.
Partly cloudy tells you that there will be a mix of sun and clouds throughout the day.
Okay.
The high of 25 degrees Celsius is the warmest temperature expected during the day, usually in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And the low of 15 degrees Celsius is the coolest temperature, typically overnight.
Okay, that makes sense.
Good.
But what about all those other symbols and terms you sometimes see, like wind speed or humidity?
Those provide additional details that can help you plan your day.
Okay.
Wind speed can tell you if it's going to be breezy or downright windy,
Uh-huh.
which might influence your choice of clothing or activities.
Okay.
Humidity, on the other hand, indicates how much moisture is in the air.
Right.
High humidity can make it feel hotter and stickier,
Yeah.
while low humidity can make it feel drier and cooler.
So understanding those details can really help you make informed decisions about your day,
It can.
like whether to pack a jacket or an umbrella.
Exactly. And it's a great way to show that you can not only understand weather forecasts,
Right.
but also use that information to navigate your surroundings in English.
You know, I've always loved how we use colorful idioms to describe the weather, like, it's raining cats and dogs.
Right.
It's such a quirky way to say it's pouring outside.
Weather idioms are fascinating.
They are.
Because they offer a glimpse into the history and culture of a language.
So what's the story behind raining cats and dogs? Because I can't imagine that actually happens.
Thankfully, no.
Okay, good.
One theory suggests that it originated in the 17th century,
Okay.
when heavy rains would wash debris and even dead animals through the streets.
Oh, that's a little less charming than I imagined.
Yeah,
But it definitely makes sense.
it does.
Yeah.
And it highlights how language evolves over time.
Mm-hmm.
What might have been a literal description centuries ago
Yeah.
has now become a playful way to describe a downpour.
So if we want to sound more fluent and expressive in English,
Yes,
do you think it's important to learn these idioms?
absolutely. They add color and personality to your language.
Okay.
Plus, using idioms correctly shows that you have a deeper understanding of English,
Right.
beyond just the literal meaning of words.
Great. It's amazing how much depth there is to something we often take for granted, like talking about the weather. I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for the language of weather.
Yeah.
And speaking of perceptions,
Yeah.
we've touched on climate change a bit throughout this deep dive.
Yeah.
I'm curious,
Yeah.
how do you think climate change is influencing the way we talk about weather?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
We're already seeing the emergence of new terms and phrases
Okay.
to describe the changing climate.
Mm-hmm.
For example, extreme weather event
Right.
has become much more common
Right.
as we experience more intense heat waves, storms, and droughts.
Yeah, and we're hearing terms like climate anxiety and eco-grief more frequently
Yeah.
as people grapple with the emotional toll of these changes.
Exactly. It's not just about the physical impacts of climate change.
Right.
It's also about how we process and communicate those impacts
Mm.
on a psychological and social level.
It makes me wonder,
Yeah.
are there any words or phrases from the past that we might need to revive or redefine
Oh,
to better describe the climate challenges we're facing now?
that's a fascinating thought.
Yeah.
Perhaps we need to re-examine words like sustainability or resilience
Okay.
to give them more weight and urgency in our current context.
Right.
Or maybe we need to invent entirely new words
Yeah.
to capture the complexities of climate change
Mm.
in a way that resonates with people.
It's almost like we need a whole new lexicon
Yeah.
for the Anthropocene epoch.
Mm-hmm.
This era where human activity is the dominant force shaping the planet.
I think you're right. Language is constantly evolving
Uh-huh.
to reflect our understanding of the world.
Right.
And as our understanding of climate change deepens,
Yeah.
so too will our language need to adapt.
It's a reminder that learning a language is never truly finished.
It's not.
There's always more to explore,
Yeah.
more nuances to uncover,
Mhm.
and new ways of expressing ourselves as the world around us changes.
Precisely. And that's what makes it so fascinating.
So to our listener who's been on this deep dive with us,
Yeah.
we hope you've not only learned some new vocabulary and idioms,
Right.
but also gained a deeper appreciation for how weather shapes our language and culture. Pay attention to the conversations around you.
Yeah.
Listen for those subtle shifts in language that reflect our changing climate.
Right.
And don't be afraid to use your newfound fluency
Yeah.
to engage in meaningful discussions about the weather, both the everyday and the extraordinary.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of weather and climate.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep learning and keep those conversations going.